We want to do a tour of checklist management, and I'm going to go ahead and click on checklist management here on the icon on the desktop and open up checklist management. And the whole idea behind checklist management is that you could create a workflow of to-do or task type items for the users on your website to do. And this plays a really vital role in recruitment or any type of application process or any kind of process that you want to work on your public-facing website, where your desire is that the website users would need to interact or complete, task type items. And to give you an example, everything always happens in the public-facing website from the profile page. And this is an example of a user who's logged in. He's on his profile page, and then here are his checklist items. And you can see right here that he has two checklist items that he has completed, and then he has a third checklist item that he has not yet completed. A completed checklist item obviously has the green checkbox, and then otherwise there's like this is a web form he would need to fill out, or there are some types of checklist items, as we'll review later, that would have a little checkbox that he could check to show that he had done that item, and so forth. And so it's a really great system, and the idea is that there would be a number of possible ways where a user would have a checklist item show up on his profile. I'm going to open up one of these checklist items and show you one of the ways. First of all, you'll see this is the checklist item, but what's important is this tab over here. Every website on the system can have as many of these tabs as they want. Like, in other words, you could add 3 or 4 more different category tabs, and then likewise, you could create as many of these items, these variables, as you want. And the whole idea is that it's kind of a matching system. So if this checklist item has registered, has not applied checked, what that means is that when a front side user of your website has a matching criteria of registered, has not applied, that this checklist item would automatically show up for them, if that makes sense. So, there's different things that can cause a variable like this to become checked off or associated with a user, and we'll cover that later. But it's important that you understand this, that depending on the way your system is configured, you can have more than one tab, and you can have more than one variable, and those variables can be anything really. And then you can pre-configure the system to have certain workflows so that users get these variables associated with them, thus having the pre-built checklist items show up and causing a workflow to kind of happen. And so that's one way that a checklist item can show up. The second way that a checklist item can show up is down here at the bottom of the checklist item. It's called a sequential checklist item. And essentially the way this works is that you can create checklist items that will show up only when other checklist items have been completed, and that's why we call it sequential. So the first thing I want to do is I want to show you how to create, sequential checklist items. And so here's the way we do that. The first thing we do, and remember I'm in the checklist management area, and I'm going to press Add New. And that's going to pop up a box, and I can name the checklist item anything I want, and we'll call this test item. And then of course you can give it a description. Now let me show you what that means. This is the name, see, second checklist item, and then what pops up over here in the little window is the description. And should you actually click on the checklist item, that's also what you would see on the page that it links to. And so the description, you can create any description you want, and I'm just going to write test description, and then I'm going to assign it to one of the websites in the system. Or global means this item would happen for all websites. If you have the right authority, you can do that. And then we have these four different types: user complete, admin complete, autocomplete, and reference form. And what that basically means is user complete means that the user would check it off to notify you when it's done. Admin complete means that one of your administrators would check it off to notify everyone that it's done. And an ideal situation where that would happen is if you had something that you wished for them to mail into you. then when you received it in the mail and confirm receipt of it, then you would check that off. Autocomplete is an association with a web form, and if you build a web form in the system using the web form management, then you can attach that web form to this item, and the idea is that it would tell them they need to complete the web form. It would link them to the web form, and when they fill the web form out and they complete it, then it would automatically, the system would automatically check it off for them. And then the final thing is a reference form, and the way that kind of works is that let's say that one of their checklist items is they need to have, say, their pastor fill out a reference form on their behalf. And this type of checklist item is kind of two-stage. The first stage is it asks them for their pastor's email address, and then when they provide that, the pastor would receive an automatic message stating that this particular person needs them to fill out a reference form. It would link them to the reference form. When the pastor links to the reference form and fills it out, then the system would automatically check that off as a completed item. So that's the type of checklist items that we have. We can apply it to a category, and of course we can create as many categories as we want if we have different types of categories we want to use. And then we'll skip over this and come back to it later, the order date. And then we can publish it. And then here, this is kind of neat. We can create a message that your administrator would receive when this checklist item is completed. And the whole idea there is, let me type this in, that if the user completes a checklist item, of course you want to get a message back notifying you of that so that you could follow up on it. And then if this was a web form associated checklist item, it's easy enough to do that. You just pick the web form you want and assign it like that, or you could do more than one web form as well. And so that's how that works. And then if it was sequential, then you would do it there. And so, and in fact, let's go ahead and make this a sequential checklist item, and we'll say that this checklist item would show up when the first checklist item is done. And so this checklist item ought to show up. Now I'm going to save this, and when I save it, that next tab will come up. You see that? Candidate stage. Now I can come in and I can select my criteria also for when this shows up. But the other thing is since this is a sequential checklist item, I really don't have to set anything there at all. So let me save and close this item. And now, since this is my user profile, if you remember, since my first checklist item has been filled out, this new checklist item ought to show up, and if everything's working properly, since it's sequential. And then there it is. Here's the item that we filled out, and there's my little test description and so forth. And I remember we created this as a user complete, so if the user was done with this, they'd just check it and press save, and that now notifies you, the administrator, that their checklist item is done. And so that gives you kind of an overview of why we use checklist items, and then we'll do more videos on specifically how to use them and so forth. But that's an overview of checklist management.